Big video today, my friends, and to celebrate that, we're giving away $5,000 amongst those who quote tweet the video with GFM and do one more thing, and what that is, I'm gonna tell you in a few minutes, so stay tuned and let's roll! In today's video, we will do a deep dive into the VVV nodes, and I will also give you context around other projects, other node cells, for you to be able to make better investment decisions going forward. This also means this will be a slower paced video. So if you don't have 15 minutes to focus and watch this video, please bookmark this tweet and come back later. This will be informative, you will get value out of this, so please make sure you have the time and the focus to actually watch it. And to make this video even more rewarding, we're not just giving away $5,000, but also 100,000 chips and one silver VVV node. So please be sure to pick up the tips throughout the video and to watch all the way until the end. So what are the VVV nodes and how could they benefit you? They are an integral part of our Launchpad, which allows us to automatically and trustlessly decentralize tokens of the projects which launch on our Launchpad. And that means if you operate VVV nodes, you don't need to worry about actively participating in the Launchpad. You receive the tokens from all the projects which have their IDO on our platform passively. By looking at our existing portfolio, you will get a very good idea about the quality of projects which you can expect on the Launchpad, and you will also see which categories we focus on. The Bitcoin ecosystem, AI, DePIN, gaming, real-world assets. We will focus on getting the best projects onto the Launchpad for you. And that, my friends, was the big plan all along. Build out this VC brand which has access to the best deals in the entire industry, which is able to invest into Nillion, Meso, Ganzilla, who has the exposure on social media, who can be a valuable partner to all the projects it invests in, and now use our entire arsenal, everything we have, to bring projects of this caliber onto the Launchpad and let you benefit from the passive exposure and from the bigger unlocks and the shorter vesting. And now I will give you a few tangible examples of how it would have looked like for you as a node operator if other Launchpads would have had the same structure. And we're going to use the examples of Polkastarter and CoinList. Then you can get an idea for the numbers, for the sustainability, and for the rewards as a whole. Before we do so, let's reveal how these Launchpads actually work. Launchpads charge fees. They charge fees to the projects which they bring on for an IDO, and some Launchpads also charge fees to the end user, i.e. to you. And the way this might look like in many popular examples is project comes onto the Launchpad with a $500,000 ticket, then 10% of that, meaning $50,000 of token value, go to the Launchpad. This amount does not get raised from the participants. This goes to the Launchpad, usually to the team, for free, because these are the fees. That's how the Launchpad gets paid. Those $50,000 are then being kept by the team. The project does a 10x, 25x, 30x, or whatever. These tokens stay with the team. In our case, what we do, we take these tokens and instead of keeping them, we distribute them through the nodes to you. Now, in many Launchpad cases, what you will also see is that there's another fee for the end user. So the way this might look like is you invest $1,000 into a project on a Launchpad, then the project does a 5x, you end up with $5,000, but the Launchpad charges fees. And I've seen fees up to 25%. That means those $5,000 which you now have in unrealized profits, well, 25% get deducted. That means to you, there's only $3,750 which you will receive. The remaining amount of these tokens of the value, again, goes to the Launchpad. And this is how the average Launchpad in general functions. And now we will look into the practical examples. If we would look into Polkastarter and CoinList, how would the fees come back to the node operators if they would adopt our structure? And I'm going to use this example to give you an idea about the range of rewards which you then can expect on our Launchpad. And here's CoinList with up-to-date numbers. In the past 6 months alone, CoinList raised $100 million. 95, we're going to call it 100 for simplicity. $100 million in the past 6 months alone. Now, what is the average return which they generate for the participants on the Launchpad? The average return is a 19x. So they probably charge somewhere around a 10% fee. That means of those $100 million, 10% of these tokens go to the Launchpad as fees. These $10 million now generate on average a 19x. To keep the numbers low, to lowball and to be conservative, we're just going to take a 10x, okay? So we have $10 million in fees times 10x is $100 million in fees. Now, how would those numbers look like if the $100 million in fees would go to the node operators? And in our case, and I'm going to go into this in a later section of this video, I will cover how many nodes we have and how many nodes we have compared to other projects like Aethir, Kip, or Carve, for example. I'm going to cover that. But those $100 million in fees which are being generated over the past 6 months, in our case, assuming that we would sell every single node we have, that would mean that in the past 6 months alone, our node operators would have earned $20,000 from those fees, passively, without doing anything, just by operating the node. And I will cover our pricing strategy as well. But just as a side note here, to put the rewards, which we just spoke about, in perspective, the silver node, which we have, is $1,000. And this is flat pricing. The price does not increase over time. If you buy the node later, you will not have to pay more, like in the case of most other projects which are selling their nodes. Now we'll take a very conservative example to run the numbers again, and then in our Discord server, you also have a calculator. One of our auditors has made a calculator available where you can put in any numbers which you expect us to do, and then you will see how sustainable the model is and how big the rewards are. And here we have the example of Polkastarter. We just heard CoinList did $100 million in volume in only 6 months. Other launchpads don't focus so much on the volume because they are already extremely lucrative even at smaller scale. So that means in the case of Polkastarter, over the course of the past years, they only did $41 million in volume. And let's take again the 10% fee. Maybe they charge even more. 10% fee on those $40 million is $4 million. And I also looked up the average return which Polkastarter generates, and that is reported with an average all-time high on their IDOs of 33x. So for the case of this example, we're going to take way lower numbers because we want to be very conservative with our assumptions, right? So $4 million in fees, and we just take a 10x return instead of a 33x return. Then $4 million in fees turn into $40 million in total value. Now, if Polkastarter would have had the node system and would have distributed those fees across the node operators, those $40 million would have been distributed amongst them. And if we take the maximum amount possible of the nodes which we can sell, then in our case, this would equal $8,000 per node. And then let's just assume it takes us 2 years to get to this level to do the $40 million in volume. Then that would equal $4,000 per year per node. And of course, the numbers are much more attractive. If you have 5 nodes or 10 nodes, it's a different story. But even if you have only 1 node, you can already see how the numbers add up. Before we jump into the most interesting part of this video, I will give you the last step to participate in the giveaway. Again, step number 1, quote tweet this video with GFM, which means good fucking morning. Step number 2, you join our Discord server, and the link is in the comment down below. Then you have to go through the join channel where you then get the Imperator role. And that's all you need to do. You now are in the pool for $5,000, and these will be 10 times $500 to have more winners, and 100,000 chips which you're going to give away. Again, split up across many different winners because you want as many people to win as possible, and then the big main prize will be the silver node. So stay tuned, my friends, quote tweet the video, join the server, get the role, and then keep the fingers crossed to hopefully win. Alright, the first example is called Kip. Kip had 50,000 nodes available during their sale, and if they sold all of them, they would have raised $50 million. Now, the second example is a project called Carve. How many nodes did Carve have available? They had available 100,000 nodes. And if they sold all of them, they would have equaled $200 million. The third example is probably the most popular one. Some of you maybe even have bought some of those nodes, and hopefully you can answer the following question. The project is called Aethir. How many nodes did they have available for sale? With how many other node operators do you have to share your rewards? Do you know the answer? The maximum amount of nodes which they had available was also 100,000. And how much money did they raise? They sold all of them. They would have raised $350 million. So just to give you an idea about the very common scale in those node sales. How many nodes do we have available? We sell exactly 5,000 nodes. And just to reiterate, that is 95% less than Aethir, 95% less than Carve. The reason why we chose to keep the quantity small is because I know that the value of any asset to a large extent is driven by scarcity. Gold is valuable because it is scarce. It's not easy to acquire. Our nodes are scarce, especially compared to any of the other node sales out there. We are dealing with projects which sell tens of thousands of nodes. We only have 5,000. We greatly limited the amount of nodes that are available because we wanted them to be of value to anyone who can get one. And now, how much money do we raise in total? We raise only $10 million. So you see, the node quantities add up, and so does the money. We raise a hell of a lot less than any of the other projects. And it gets even more interesting than that, because we don't just look at the quantity of nodes and the amount of money that has been raised. We also take into account the pricing strategy. So let's look at the famous example. I'm not going to name the project. I have some data censored here, but this structure is generally speaking how all node sales work. So now we're going to look at this, and we will compare this to how we have approached this exact scenario. And understanding all of this fully will allow you to avoid the wrong sales going forward, or it will keep you from buying nodes at the wrong tiers. Because there's a very important differentiation here. Not all nodes are created equal. Meaning, the nodes themselves, they might be the same all across those tiers of those different projects, but the profitability and the risk greatly changes throughout the tiers. And most importantly, the risk for you as a buyer, the higher the tier, it increases exponentially. And it also sadly means if you buy after a certain tier, the odds of you losing money are very, very high. And the odds of you making money from that investment are very, very low. So we have to be sure that even if we see a project which we like, we invest in the right tier, or we say, okay, this is too risky for us. And what you see here is public information. I'm not sharing any secrets. I've still censored anything that relates to the project's name because I want to use this as a general example. I've looked through many, many different node sales, and roughly speaking, this structure is exactly how most of them work. So far, to be honest, I've only seen one other exception apart from us, which does it differently, which has a fair pricing model. So this model here, and I call it the pyramid pricing model because the price increases over time with each tier. This is the most prominent model because it's the most lucrative for the projects selling the nodes. But now let's do a deep dive into the structure. So the most important thing which you see here, there's 100,000 nodes available. But the real kicker is the price of each node. All of those nodes are the same, but they are priced differently. The issue with this pricing model and the reason why we decided against it are easily explained. So you have tier 1, 2, and 3. I've blacked out the names here, but these tiers almost always are reserved for the team or for specific partners. So you never have access to the most lucrative tiers to begin with. Then you say, okay, then at least let me get into tier 4 or 5, because these look like a good deal. Now you have the issue here again. These are gated. These are kept only for KOL or VCs, and now even a good VC has to fill a specific ticket size in order to get these lower tiered nodes. Meaning, even if I come to them and I say, hey, I want those lower tiered nodes, they also tell me, well, you have to invest $500,000 or $1 million. Usually, you cannot get these lower tiered nodes unless you invest a certain amount of money. And that amount usually exceeds what any normal person would ever invest. If you only have $1,000 and you show up to the public sale, then you have the issue that throughout the private sales, these tiers, all of those more lucrative tiers, are already sold out. They have never been available to you. Then you come to the public sale, and then usually throughout the private rounds, all of these tiers already get filled up partially or fully. So that means there's even more of the lower tiered nodes which are already taken out because private investors have taken them. Then once you show up to the public sale, then all that's left is usually anything beyond tier 14 and higher. So a single node already costs $2,000, and then the price rapidly shoots up. The more demand there is for this project, the more rapidly the price shoots up, which means then you pay $3,000, $5,000, $7,000, up to $14,000 for a single node. And the worst thing is, if you buy the node for $14,000, you get the exact same node which someone else bought for $1,000. And this is very problematic because it also means, and full disclosure, I'm an investor. In this specific example, I invested into this project, and I invested in a lower tiered node because I understand the dynamic, and I understand if I buy a node at tier 5 and 6, and this project, in this particular example, they already sold the tiers 9 to 14. So I know if I come in at those lower tiered nodes, my risk is pretty much zero because a lot of other people have bought at way higher prices. So no matter what happens, usually the chances of me losing money are rather low. But that comes at the expense of anyone else who bought those nodes at higher tiers. And that's not a fair pricing model. That's super risky, especially for the retail investor. For those people who only want to buy 1 or 2 nodes, that's extremely risky. It's not a good structure because it greatly discriminates against people who don't want to invest a lot of money. Let me ask you this. In any of those node sales, of all those different projects, did they explain to you, depending on the tier which you bought, which conditions need to be met in order for these nodes to become profitable for you? Did they give you examples? Did they give you a time frame which you can expect these to ever yield a return? Probably not. And there's another metric which you have to take into account, and that's the FDV. In those lower tiered nodes, which we know are already reserved, tier 1 to 3, the FDV already shoots up from 166 to 220 million FDV. Then tier 4 and 5, probably as a small investor, we can also not get. Now we can try our luck with the tiers 6 to 10, and we have to get really, really lucky to get one single node in any of those tiers. Even there, we are already dealing with an FDV of 300 million up to $500 million. And then in this particular example, this project sold way beyond tier 20. Okay, just so you're aware of this. That means you're dealing already out of the gate with an FDV of at least $1 billion. And here you see, this is estimating that they only sell 50% of their nodes. And I think they sold a lot more than 50%. That means probably you're dealing with a higher FDV than $1 billion. And now you can imagine what needs to happen, what miracles need to happen for that deal to ever become profitable for the people who bought in these tiers. Because the FDV shoots up to 2 billion. I mean, these are crazy numbers, my friends. You have to have this project trading and operating at a $2 billion FDV to break even. That is insanity. And that's why many of these node sales are super risky, because there's no transparency about why did they choose this pricing model? Why not go for the flat pricing model? Why not make it fair? Why not make it fair for the smaller investors? Why give the KOLs and the VCs and the partners special treatment? Why reserve the most lucrative nodes to the team only? These are questions which will never be answered. And these are also questions, and now I'm going to come back to the topic. These are the questions which we asked ourselves, and why we decided to go for a different structure, which is fair, where the people who buy in our upcoming private sale, they get the same price as the people who eventually buy on the public sale. And this is important for us because this discrimination against people who come newly to your project and want to be a part of it, that's just plain wrong. If someone sees a new project and thinks the project has potential, the last thing you do is want to put that person at a disadvantage. So that's the reason why we chose the fair pricing model. And which other project chose the same model? There's only one out there, and that's Gantzilla. They also have a very similar model to us, flat pricing across all different tiers. And in our case, we have silver, gold, and platinum. In the Gantzilla case, it's a epic, rare, and so on. And here is a preview of what you will find in our Discord server. This is the calculator which our auditor has made for you to be able to put in your own numbers and then determine for your personal appetite of risk whether or not this model is sustainable from your perspective, whether or not the rewards are big enough for you to consider it a worthwhile investment. And you also have the overview. You see the pricing, you see the price per token, you see the additional value that is being logged in each node, and I'm going to cover this in the next part. You see everything. You see the amount of nodes, you see the monthly yield, the yearly yield. You can put in your own numbers, and you can make sure they align with your expectations. I gave you the example of PolkaStarter. This is below my personal worst case scenario. But even if you're super skeptical and you say, well, I don't think you can get to that level. Well, then let's say, okay, let's cut it in half. Then we don't have $8,000 in rewards, but $4,000 in rewards over 2 years. It's still profitable. It's still a good deal. Let's say, okay, I don't even believe that. Let's cut it in half again. And then it's not $4,000, but it's $2,000. It's $1,000 per year. The node costs $1,000. It is still a good deal. You still double your money. And this was important. We wanted to make sure that the worst case scenario, even if you cut it in half, you cut it in half again, it's still a good deal. This is how you create a sustainable model. This is how the rewards make sense. But we didn't stop there. There's even more to our nodes. We don't just have the yield from the IDOs on our launchpad, and we have done the math. We know this is an extremely lucrative model. We also have native yield of our own token, the token that is being used by the participants to access the launchpad. So the way this is split up is into linear yield and the activity yield. In the middle you see the launch pool yield, which is exactly what we've spoken about up until this point. But now let's dive into the actual yield of our own token. And for that, we will just jump back and take a look at the performance of other launchpads during the past bull run. What we have seen during the last bull is a launchpad like CDFI shot up from 46 cents up to $16 per token. That is the inherent value of the launchpad in itself. People pay, especially during the bull market, people pay exponential amounts of money to access these launchpads because the deals which they present are so lucrative. Let's take another example. We spoke about PolkaStarter already in the beginning of the video. PolkaStarter was hovering around 25 cents for a very long time. Then the bull came and it shot up to $6.4. This is the inherent value of the tokens of these launchpads because they are the gate to some of the most lucrative investments, especially during a bull market. But even during a bear market, these launchpads still yield returns. While everyone else struggles, they usually still are able to create returns for the participants. So throughout any market conditions, launchpads stay relevant. Now we know a few things. We know the fees which the launchpads generate are very high, and there's a lot of money to be made there. In our case, the fees which you generate, they flow back to the node operators. We also know that access to the launchpad alone through the token is extremely valuable. The price reflects that. We've seen the price of these launchpad tokens shoot up sky high during the bull market because they grant access to something that's super lucrative to the participants. And now if we put these two things together, we have a node that gives you access to the fees which our launchpad generates, and it also gives you the token itself which other participants, or maybe yourself, want to use to access the specific IDOs on the launchpad itself. So we combine a huge amount of value in one particular asset which is scarce on top of it, which is priced fairly, and where the entire structure is made in order to benefit you. If you want to take a closer look at all of this, then in the comments down below, you will find the link to our website, to this section specifically, where you can read about the passive yield of our notes. You can see how it works exactly. You can also see what the yield consists of, meaning the VVV token yield and also the yield from the IDOs on our launchpad. And at the very bottom, we have an FAQ section for you where we have answered the most common questions in great detail. And of course, I suggest you join our Discord server. There you have access to the calculator. You stay up to date with the upcoming private sale, the public sale. You can ask questions and you can claim the role to participate in our giveaway. Thank you so much for watching, my friends. I hope this video was valuable to you. Please do not forget to quote tweet with GFM, and I will see you on the next one. Until then, peace out.
Sun is down, freezing cold. That's how we already know. When it's here, my dog will probably do it for Louis Bell. That's just all he know, he don't know nothing else. I tried to show him. Yeah, I tried to show him.